Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. In a recent interview that I did with the narrative director of Destiny 2, I asked this question, which led to a pretty mysterious answer. If there was one thing that you could say to the Destiny community in terms of, from a story perspective, things from the past that we need to chew on more, that you sort of see like, oh, I feel like there's some rich material here that could be so much more sumptuous than you guys realize. Is there a direction you could point us in, or a particular theme that you think that we should or could do?
What are the things Destiny doesn't talk about? Like in Destiny's like whole like story and lore, like what doesn't it talk about?
Hell yeah, okay, thank you so much. So, to dig into this and to help explore what Alison has prompted us with there, I've reached out to none other than Bife to try and unpack things a bit. So, hello Bife, it's nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me on the video, and thank you for jumping on the content that we did the other day on my channel as well.
Yeah, man, of course. We've been cooking story stuff together recently in various places. We did some Witch Queen story as well. It's been amazing, but that's a topic for another video. Today we're focusing on this very mysterious answer/question from Alison. What are the things Destiny doesn't talk about? And in Destiny's whole story and lore, what just doesn't it talk about? What's missing? So I mentioned this to you, Bife, and you came up with a few different bits and pieces. And I'm just going to say, from the little list that you compiled, maybe just pick a one at random and we can start there. What are the missing pieces in Destiny?
Okay, so the one that I originally wanted to pick out with you, because I think it's just really fun, is Neptune's moon of Triton. This sounds so specific and so odd, but it bleeds into a ton of themes. Okay. Right? So the main thing we know about this is all about the idea that it's just orbiting Neptune and, you know, doing its thing. But indigenously, there's a bunch of space spiders out there in Neptune, and Triton is the place where they live. Yeah. Right? It's just like an entirely unseen alien species in Destiny. Oh my God. This, I think, bleeds into our first theme, really, which is just like, and realistically, the first thing that I think we haven't explored, which is just like, hey, is there other life that's out there in Sol that just has not ever been involved in the war of light and dark that we've played out in the system that maybe isn't getting involved until just now? And like, there are tons of worlds out there in Sol itself. You know, we have so many moons in the planetoids that orbit our sun. We have everything that's all the way out there in the heliopause. And life can exist in a bunch of different places, especially when Destiny plays relatively loose with its sci-fi in the moments where it's convenient. Yep. You know, I think those are the moments where it's likely that you're going to see a bunch of different species just suddenly arriving out of nowhere. You know, because it's pretty canned right now in Destiny to have like our 7 enemy factions. So, you know, Hive, Fallen, Cabal, Vex, Taken, Scorn, and Dread. But the reality is it doesn't need to just condense into just those, right? Like, it's entirely possible there are other forces out there we've just never encountered. Yeah.
Have there been mentions of, beyond those spiders, which sound crazy, beyond those, have there been other mentions of things here and there that have sort of been left untouched for many years? Or has there just been no focus on the idea of anything beyond those sort of core 7?
So I think that the hottest one that has not necessarily been touched or developed a bunch over the years is definitely the Aphelion, right? Okay. Like, they're a group that's mentioned a lot in the story of the Awoken, in particular with characters like Sieur Ido. But the Aphelion are kind of this weird anomalous hazard and creature that exists throughout Awoken space in particular, and you can tell that they've been left behind because they leave radiation in their wake. Which is a really specific trait, but like areas where there's been an Aphelion attack, you can't go near to it because of how radiated it is. So that itself, really interesting, but that's not the only thing, right? That's just local to our system. The Drifter, God bless him, has been all the way out into the darkest reaches of very, very far off planets. And some of the first armor that we got from the Drifter has lore about one of those journeys where he went out to a planet that was full of some kind of strange pyramid structure complex things, and inside those monoliths there was like some creature that was frozen and was clearly looking at them. The cold on this planet was so bad that they kept on dying, and they then found out that those creatures weren't all entombed in these various monoliths across whatever planetoid this was, right? And like, we know this wasn't Europa because the Drifter says it's way far out.
Yeah.
So like, you just have these terrifying darkness predators in this world somewhere way far out, and apparently they were able to drain the light of ghosts. So like, that's just a thing that exists somewhere out there that the Drifter has been talking about in some weird side stories that he's been doing.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've just never encountered that, you know?
Dude, I love the idea that there's almost like an SCP novel just waiting to be written about these
100%.
monster things that are seemingly contained, and then you realize, actually, no, they're not. One of them is broken containment or what have you. Like, I think that would be such a rich thing to play with. Is that something from an almost thematic perspective? Would you say that Destiny has kind of leaned in various places to like, this is the horror arc, and this is the psychological thriller arc, and this is the detective arc? Like, have they kind of bucketed stories in those ways? And are there any maybe genres of story like that feel like they're missing potentially?
So yes, they've absolutely done that.
Okay.
You're playing through Witch Queen right now, which is part investigation into this ancient family of gods and part literal detective story, which you can see.
Yeah, with the evidence board.
You know, the evidence board is the biggest hint to it, but even the achievements and the bounties you get from Finch, it's all stuff to do with like an old detective novel, even to the point where like the title that you get from Finch is called Gumshoe, which is basically a reference to literally just checking out everything as a detective and making sure that even a stick of gum on the bottom of your shoe does not get missed, right? Like, they're looking at everything. I believe that's the origin of that phrase. If not, I'm sorry, but like, it is absolutely detective based.
Cool.
But no, like, they do this with all sorts of other things, right? So, I mean, the most obvious examples are going to be things like Season of the Plunder, when they went for a full-on pirate story and like went ahead and leaned into that theme real hard. Presage, I think, is another great example where they... Oh man, if you play an exotic mission at some point soon, let it be Presage, because Presage is basically Destiny's haunted house. It's so much fun. Cool. Like, you basically go through this entire ship, and it's not... Destiny does not do well being a horror game because it's an FPS where you run predominantly with a power fantasy at the heart of your gameplay.
Yeah, and you're a god, so like, what's a little spooky ghost gonna
basically.
Do? Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you know, Presage does a half decent job, and they showed that they can absolutely build an atmosphere where stuff is scary. And so, like, yeah.
With that in mind, then, maybe let me throw a couple of other genres of things at you that haven't been done. So at least so far, I am yet to see dinosaurs.
Oh boy. Oh, that would be cool.
That's not been touched on as far as I've seen. Is that more broadly true? Is there any prehistoric Earth lore that we know of, or does the story of Destiny to date kind of start with like the Traveler era and shortly before the Traveler, but not like 1,000 years before?
So, like, the story on Earth definitely starts with, like, the modern era of the current day. So, like, 2014, I think, is the earliest actual human date that's referenced. There are some bits and pieces where there's lore that goes into the pre-Golden Age, like...
There's Bobby Fischer now in the 60s, right?
Bobby Fischer in the 60s, everything that's coming along with Edge of Fate and the potential links to Chicago, that pulls back into the 20th century.
Yep.
But it doesn't go too much further. It certainly doesn't go into... like prehistoric times.
Yeah.
There are references to genuinely, truly ancient times in some of the Nine lore. There are references to some of the times when life was literally just beginning in the sort of pre-Cambrian era.
Okay.
And you know, like, there are those moments, but that doesn't really fit with the category of like, hey, here's this giant freaking lizard creature that you now need to go out and deal with.
Yeah.
The closest I think we get is the Ahamkara, right? Which are Destiny's wish dragons.
Yeah.
And that, like, I categorize that as something different in itself because, for one, there's been not a lot, but like a reasonable amount of coverage of them. Like they show up on a semi-regular basis, narratively speaking. And there have been some characters like Riven who were developed a lot over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
But like there's, as far as I'm concerned, that is still a very unexplored region of the story, and they've left hints to it, right? Like
Okay.
there's a artifact from Season of the Wish, which was the season before Final Shape, which basically hints that there is a rumor that the Cryptarchy totally denies as being true. Like, it's absolutely not happened, that there are 7 Ahamkara still at large. Right?
Okay.
So, like, whenever Bungie writes stuff like that, that's definitely them just leaving breadcrumbs for themselves later, as I think was being said in the interview that you referenced. You know, that's them putting a condiment in the fridge.
Yeah. They've got their recipe that they're constructing, and they're like, we'll add some salt here, but we'll also save a big handful of salt for the very end of the meal because we know that it's going to be extra good there. Like,
Yes.
I dug into this a lot with Alison and her choice of design of the story, and it sounds like she is very conscious of the fact that there are things that have been mentioned in Destiny years ago that she can use at any time at will to spice things up. And some of those they're doing with the 9, for instance, in The Edge of Fate. But then there are others that we probably haven't even cottoned onto the fact that they're about to be sort of present that will surprise us in The Edge of Fate and in Renegades and beyond. On the dinosaurs thing, I'd also want to ask the question of, in terms of gaps and gaps in time, if we don't really have any dinosaur-y stuff beyond the sort of dinosaur-adjacent things of Ahamkara, moving forward in time from the dinosaurs specifically, things like ancient Egypt and the ancient Greeks, like these extremely advanced societies for their time that we in the real world have a lot of knowledge about, but also we have a lot of kind of conspiracies about, and in the real world, a lot of missing knowledge about as well. Is there any play with those themes in Destiny? Like, for example, people will ask the question, like, how did they build these pyramids? Or how did the Egyptians know all of this stuff? Like, how did they possibly put all this stuff in their hieroglyphics on their walls? Like, how could they have known that, right? It's a common conspiracy angle. I'm curious, is there a world where Destiny sort of goes, oh yeah, it is interesting that the ancient Egyptians had all of this advanced knowledge. Maybe they had help.
Yeah, so I think that there's absolutely room for that, especially because, like, cutting into ancient mythology and trying to break different bits of it into your own canon and twist them in a way that suits your story is totally something that Bungie has done before. I mean, take a look at just go back to the most obvious reference of Halo and the fact that your character is a Spartan, right? And all of a sudden you can immediately see the fact that they will happily pull a reference from Greece, but it goes even deeper than that, right? Like the original Marathon trilogy, you see a whole bunch of other references to ancient Greece, even down to the word marathon, which is a reference to part of ancient Greek culture and a place there. So, like, if you're sitting there and contemplating whether they'd happily pull from history and throw that into a Destiny context, yes, 100%. And there are some examples of how that can kind of clash with the way that they've done ancient history in the game currently. So, I mean, Osiris, I think, is the most obvious example of a character. Obviously, Osiris is an actual god within the pantheon of the ancient Egyptian culture. So it was definitely one of those moments where they pulled that name directly. But then there's the questions of why was Osiris named Osiris, and what are the links? And to your point, what are the things that might have happened in the ancient Earth timeline of Destiny that we didn't know about, which might have been impacted by any number of things, right? We know it predates the Traveler, but we don't know about some other entities, right? So the 9 individuals that have been brought up on a regular basis. And then there's some other terrifying potential. Let's talk about Nezarec for a second.
Sure, let's do it. I don't know what that is, but let's do it.
Yeah, this is a mild spoiler to a certain extent, but it's fine. I'm going to talk in vague terms. Nezarec is a kind of eldritch entity, and is terrifying. But cultists on Earth apparently have passed down a tome called Of Hated Nezarec since pre-Golden Age times. Now, that is as broad as basically saying could be anywhere from 2014 to the birth of human history as we know it, like 12,000 years ago or so. So we don't know how old this text is, but the implication is that this god has kind of been looking over Earth and humanity for all that time. And depends on how far back you go, but like there is an entire range of history for them to work with there. Yeah. So like it's not impossible that if you take these moments in history and suddenly pull them all the way back, you can insert some other godlike figures there, Like people have been probably manipulating and playing around with Earth's history for a very, very long time.
Dude, that's juicy. That's so the idea, because if were they called Netherrack? Nezarec. If Nezarec has been observing at the very least, then that means that we've been there to be observed by these external entities. Who's to say that there can't be a dozen of them? Who's to say there can't be a suite of observers out there or meddlers, right, that may have been playing games on a much grander scale than even the gods that we understand, the Savathuns or what have you. If you'd call Savathun a god, I don't know if you would, but like the almost tier of entity that we have played with so far may just be like the present day local news, but we might have the international news to deal with at some point. Like there might be an entire echelon of creature, of species of god or what have you that might be observing it all.
And this is why it's cool that Destiny is exploring the secrets of the solar system a bit more closely in the Fate saga. But man, if there's ever times after that and we venture beyond the heliopause, Destiny can get truly wild. Because at that point, you're looking at a massive span of galaxy that is uncharted and full of potential. But yeah, you've got places like Reese, which is the fallen homeworld. There may be some stuff going on with that in the future. The Vanguard sent probes out to a bunch of relevant locations, which I'm not going to mention because potential spoilers might be in there.
Yep.
But like, there's some really cool stuff that awaits us way out beyond the solar system. And we're not even exploring some other bits. One last tiny bit, which will take 30 seconds though.
Yep.
Last thing, I keep going on about it in so many of my videos, but there's one last place called the Cocytus Apertures. Okay. It's a series of gateways that lead to other dimensions that's just chilling out in the reef. So like,
wow,
this was previously linked to the Nine. Then before that, it was taken over by Crota and linked into his throne world. Like, you just have a bunch of interesting, cool story MacGuffins that are out there in the middle of the solar system. And this is one of them. And I think it's so underutilized.
Okay, well, as far as things that haven't been talked about or haven't been talked about enough, it's right there. So I look forward to seeing that be the grand reveal in the Edge of Fate. The prophecy has been laid out before us by the Lore Master. No, but in all seriousness, I'm sure there are dozens of things like this that we could sort of dig into today.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, we are short on time, so we're going to have to end this video here. But if you guys would like to hear more exploration and yappery between Bife and I on this topic or an adjacent topic, then just let us know in the comment section. Bife, very grateful for you coming on at short notice to get this recorded as well. So thank you for that. And I'm eagerly awaiting all of these story reveals, Alison. So fingers crossed she has some crazy stuff cooked up ready for us for the Edge of Fate as well. So yeah.
Hell
Thanks,
yeah.
Bife.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me on.